What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined by your two favorite people on this podcast, Chris Fedor, Jimmy Watkins, two of the best in the business. I know it's kind of like an off day for us today, guys, so let's get into what you guys did today. I want to just start with that because Jimmy, you are not with us, so I want to start off with you on what you had going on your docket today.
Oof, I don't mean to bore people. This might drop me in the favorite podcast power rankings, honestly. But I mean, I did my job. Wrote a column about how important it is for the Cavs to give Donovan Mitchell some help in Game 2, as we've discussed on this podcast ad nauseum. Check that out in the morning at cleveland.com. And then I went to my mother's house to watch. Okay, here's something fun. I went to my mother's house to dog sit for her dog Nala, who has her own TikTok page. Nala has her own TikTok page created by my niece Taylor, and it's really great, particularly because my mom does most of the TikToks. My mom is a middle-aged woman who doesn't really know what she's doing on TikTok, so like it's like so bad it's good content a lot of the time. Like the most recent video is a Cinco de Mayo themed, like basically the dog doesn't do anything, just sleeps all the time, so they have to work around their problematic cast member, and so they figured out a way to like knock over a shot glass with a lime in it, and it looks like Nala had a really rough Cinco de Mayo, and there's like they have a sign in the back that says like stay hangover or something. Really cringe, but follow Nala the cute doggo on TikTok if you want to.
Shameless plug. I love it. Shameless plug. That is not where I thought that was going. But I definitely wanted to set up what Chris and I had going on today with practice, going over to Emerson College and trying to see what was going on with the Cavs. Chris, go in more depth of what we had going on today, all the different activities we got into, and maybe even preview some of the stories that you have coming for these fans.
Well, I started my day with a long walk, even though it was rainy here in Boston. That was nice to just kind of get outside. And I'm staying in a different area of Boston than I usually do. I usually stay closer to the TD Garden in the North End area. Sometimes I'll stay near Fenway Park just because it's awesome. Sometimes I'll stay in Cambridge just because the prices are a little bit cheaper. I'm staying in a place called South Boston this time that I'm not really familiar with, so I wanted to get familiar with it. And the best way for me to do that is to either go for a run or go for a walk. So I did that earlier, and then we went to practice, Emerson College. I did see Jared Allen briefly, and it feels like to me this is a lot of gamesmanship on behalf of the Cavs just by listing him as questionable repeatedly. And JB Bickerstaff is going to say pregame before game 2, he's going to say we'll see when asked about his availability. But like Jarrett pushed the button for the elevator with his shoe in his hand. Like he used his shoe kind of like as a poking device for the button on the elevator because he didn't want to reach forward, because he didn't want to make any of those kinds of movements. So I just think this is a guy who is clearly in discomfort. If you watch him on the bench throughout the course of games, he is clearly in discomfort. He looks like he's having a hard time breathing. He looks like he has a hard time moving. He's just kind of like robotic when it comes to his movements. And I've been reporting all along that the hardest thing for him to do right now is raise his arms above his head. But when I saw him push the elevator button with the shoe in his hand so that he could use the size 16 to extend the reach, yeah, that was pretty telling to me. I had a sit down with Darius Garland. Him and I talked one-on-one about how he deals with his struggles in the playoffs, whether him not playing up to his own standards, if that's weighing on him. I talked to Tristan Thompson, who is his mentor, about that as well. So I've got that story coming for tomorrow morning. I thought Darius said some interesting things about the differences in this series against Boston versus the series that he just played against Orlando, and some of the opportunities that he thinks are going to be there for him. He also talked a little bit about the mental challenge when it comes to playoff basketball and what he's learned over the last 2 years. So that'll be on cleveland.com/Cavs. What else did we do? Oh, we went to lunch together. That was awesome. We went to a taco spot that was really, really good. I think it was called El Jefe Tacos, right?
El Jefe Taqueria. Yes, sir.
Yeah, which loosely translates to Boss Tacos, right? Okay, great. And then I went back to my hotel. I walked back to my hotel to get some more exercise because El Jefe really brought the heat. And I definitely needed to walk off that meal. It was myself, it was Ethan, it was Ryan Lewis from the Akron Beacon Journal, and it was my man Joe Varden from The Athletic. We all went to lunch together, went back to the hotel. I wrote my Darius piece so that the paper could have it in time. I hit the deadline. Yay me. Thank you. By a minute, I think I hit my deadline. And then I got ready for dinner. We had a big dinner at my favorite restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants across the entire beat. New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, you name it. It is an Italian spot in North End. It is called R2. It was fantastic. It was a combination of us beat reporters and two members of the Cavs PR staff. We all got together. We shared a meal. I drank San Pellegrino. Some other people drank wine, and we talked about a lot of things from the past. We shared stories from the beat, and it was just really, really fun to get everybody together in the same spot for what I think is one of the best meals that you're going to have at any restaurant across this beat.
I first of all want to say that I love the shameless plugs on this podcast already. This is fantastic. While also throwing in cleveland.com/Cavs. That was smooth, Chris. I see you. And
hey man, 10-year pro of doing radio. I ain't no dummy when it comes to promotion.
Also had to throw in that you had the San Pellegrino. Of course you did. Of course you did. Of course. Man. But no, we have some questions from our subtexters today.
No. Don't bury the lead here. You need to back me up on how good the meal was.
I'm getting there. I have to let people know why they're going to be here for a little bit longer.
No,
I have to make sure that they stay.
Yo, man, like if they click on this podcast, they know what they're getting. They know why they're coming. Back me up on R2 right now. You inhaled your food. Your food was gone before anybody else.
I was second. I was watching one of the Cavs PR members. It was close, but I was second. I got the carbonara. It was fantastic. The meat that they put in it was the perfect amount of saltiness to match the creaminess that went with the spaghetti alla carbonara. That was perfection. As somebody that has tried to make carbonara before, I'm not on that level yet. It was really good. And like Chris said, they were telling stories from the past, and as being in my first year on the beat, I'm just sitting there soaking it all in. Cause sure, I watched the Cavs when they were going to the NBA finals. Sure, I watched them when they were having LeBron and all of those things, but I was not in the moment. I was not in the arena, in the locker room, being able to envelop in those stories, and also learning background stuff that I would have never learned if I was not on this beat was fantastic. And it was just such a great time. It was like a reminder. I sent out a subtext earlier this week talking about it's my first road trip during the playoffs for any beat that I've covered. I talked about how just rewarding this feeling felt for me just to be here. And also, thank you guys again for just watching, listening, and tuning into our stuff. That's really important for us. We cannot do it without you. But just being able to be in the room and learn from guys that have done it for so long and have so much experience. Like, it was so great just to continue to learn. Like, I feel like I'm a sponge and I'm just trying to keep learning information. So, but yeah, to rehash on the point that was supposed to be made, R2 was banging. If you were in Boston, go and try it out, especially if you like Italian food. We didn't even really get into everything on the menu. We had 2 people get the same thing because they already knew what they were getting coming in.
Yep.
Chris got the same thing he's gotten for the last however many years. Like, everybody enjoyed their meals. Yeah. So, Jimmy, whenever you're in Boston, man, next time.
How many of these I assume a lot of them are LeBron stories, are for podcast consumption. How many of them are for podcast consumption?
Those are the stories that we're gonna save for the summer when we have little to talk about, Jimmy. I'm telling you now.
I tried, subtexters. I tried.
And Chris is making a face because he doesn't know how far we'll go with those conversations. But I feel like I got some questions that are subtext and storyline worthy only for us podcasters. So that's for you guys who think that we're gonna just go away when the summer comes around. That's not the case.
Zero.
Talk about
Zero
promotions. Come on, Chris. Come on.
What happened to promotion? What happened to promotion? I thought you were a promotion guy.
That's what I'm.
There are other ones.
See me working over here, Jimmy. You see me working. Anyway, all right. For now, why the people click on this podcast, as what Chris said, it is time for another rendition of Hey Chris. Yeah, we've talked about Chris a lot on this podcast already, but you guys still got questions.
Too much.
So we're gonna get into it. So here's how it goes. Subtexters subscribe to our subscription service called Subtext. 14-day free trial or $3.99 a month. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or go to cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top. That's the way that you can join this and get your questions heard. This is probably the only podcast with a subscription service that allows fans to send in questions that will go up every single week. So we're going to get into it. And we're starting off with a big one. I'm reading these in order, so we're not switching around or nothing. Here's the first one. From Rollin in Canton, Ohio. I apologize if I messed your name up. I am notorious for doing that. But the question is, what are the 3 best qualities that JB brings as a head coach, and what is one of the worst? Chris, you've been around the guy for 5 years. Let me know what you think.
All right, so, I think one of the things that he has done with this team, it is very hard in general to get young teams to buy into defense first. They want to score. They want to jack a bunch of threes. They want all the glitz and the glam and the stats. So he has gotten this team to become a top 10 defense every single year that JB Bickerstaff has been here. I don't think you can overlook that. He has gotten them to buy in to this particular identity, to this particular style. I also think he's really, really good when it comes to building cultures. It's something that he learned throughout the course of his time in Memphis. He took tips from some of the other assistants that he knows really, really well, including David Fizdale and what Fizz learned during his time as a head coach and also while he was with the Miami Heat. This culture here is one that I think people want to be a part of. It's not a disaster the way that it was in the early stages of the rebuild. And I do believe that JB Bickerstaff deserves credit for getting the Cavs out of the darkest stages of this rebuild. Rebuilds are very, very difficult, guys. They're very, very long, and there's no guarantee that a team is actually going to get out of the rebuild and come out on the other side. And he has allowed them to get through the dark times of the rebuild, and he has brought them here where they are. It's the Eastern Conference Semifinals. There are 8 teams remaining in the NBA. Only 8. And the Cavs are one of them. So I do think you have to give him credit for that as well. And I do think he is good when it comes to communicating the things that he demands from players and the things that he wants from players. Coming into this season, every single player in that locker room was given like a note card with a bunch of bullet points, and it's pinned up in each individual player's locker, and it outlines their roles and their responsibilities and the specific areas where those guys can best help the Cavs win basketball games. It's not about necessarily what's best for that individual, but it's best for team success. It's what that individual needs to do to have that translate to team success. So those are the things that stand out to me. The weakness, I think, is obvious. This offense just is not dynamic enough. The Cavs, members of the Cavs front office, gave JB Bickerstaff, I don't want to say an ultimatum because I think that's going too far, but they basically said to him, your responsibility in the offseason, coming off the heels of the playoff flameout against the Knicks, members of this organization said to JB, fix this offense, make this offense more dynamic, diversify the offensive attack. And the front office said, we'll get you more pieces, we'll get you different pieces, we'll get you more two-way type players, but you need to make this offense get a little bit closer to what you've done with the defense. And in the regular season, the Cavs showed flashes of that. They certainly weren't bottom 5, bottom 10 in the NBA. They were basically middle of the pack in terms of offensive efficiency. But so far in the playoffs against both Orlando and the one game against Boston, this offense has not been good enough. And I do think that JB deserves a little bit of blame for that. And I do think it is his responsibility when it comes to schemes, tactics, play calls, player development. All of those things are under that same umbrella. And unless he shows that he can be a better tactician, and unless he shows that he can make this offense what it probably should be with Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, with Jared Allen, I think it's something that is going to be put under the microscope this offseason, and it's going to be up for evaluation.
So yeah, I would echo some of the same strengths as Chris. Building a defensive culture, it just can't be overstated how difficult that is with such a young team. Now, obviously, it helps to have two defensive anchors who, I mean, I was talking to, this is not me, I'm not sourced up guy, but I was talking to someone I had a loose connection with in the Western Conference in a back hallway. Someone who would know, like someone not 10th on the what do they call it? The list of names there's a word for it. He's higher up than you might think.
Hierarchy,
sure. There's a different word I'm looking for. It's going to bother me for the rest of the podcast. I might just blurt it out in 20 minutes, but whatever. He basically called Jared Allen and Evan Mobley two cheat codes on defense, which I think complicates, and for both the fan base and the front office, their evaluation of JB as a defensive coach. But make no mistake, it's still hard to build a good defensive culture with a young team. And those aren't the only two guys that have bought into it. Obviously, it helps to have Jared and Evan behind everything. But like Isaac Okoro, while having a strong defensive reputation out of college, that doesn't always translate right away. I think Donovan Mitchell, him individually, deserves a lot of credit for how much more he's bought in on the defensive end, particularly this year. I mean, coming out of Utah, I mean, the narratives were ugly with him. The Jalen Brunson, you could like a lot of the money that Jalen Brunson got from the New York Knicks a couple summers ago, Donovan Mitchell deserves to be getting some residuals off that because Jalen Brunson was cooking him in that Utah-Dallas series. And by the way, it still ain't enough. Yeah. It still ain't enough. They still owe Jalen. They still should give Jalen Brunson more money. That's one of the best contracts in the league. JB deserves credit for getting Donovan to buy into that.
Right.
I think. Same with Darius Garland, who's had moments this. I mean, again, Darius Garland, never going to light the world on fire defensively. Always going to have his size is going to be an issue. The way we talk about him working through contact on offense, that same thing applies to him on defense. But I think the buy-in is there more often now. I mean, I think game 7, I believe, he had 3 steals against the Magic.
Mm-hmm.
That's progress. He's working. That's a working stat. And again, I'll defer to Chris on the other strengths as well. I think JB is a good communicator. I think we can even see that the way he talks to us as media members. Like, he knows how to get a point across. He knows how to tell us something that I don't know, this is all that important to basketball, but he knows how to make me feel like he told me something without giving anything away, which I think is, like, honestly matters. In like, media perception matters. So
right.
That's another strength. I think I've only named 2 strengths. I think actually this year he also deserves credit for the adaptability he did show at certain points of the season, like the hard pivot they made mid-season after Garland and Mobley went down from Twin Towers kind of plotting sort of team. We're gonna muck it up to not quite 7 seconds or less, but like, we're playing fast as heck and shooting the first 3 we get a lot of times. You don't see that very often mid-season. You don't see it work as well as it did. It's to the point where he's on the coach of the year ballot for the 2nd straight year. So it's a tricky evaluation, because on the other end, we've talked about it, the players are sort of saying it without saying it. They want to see more adjustments. They want to see quicker adjustments. And I think one thing that JB gets caught in, and a lot of defensive coaches get caught in this, is whatever your thing is. In JB's case, it's defense. You lean into that a little bit too much, right? Like, you're a guy like Isaac Okoro is going to get more leash because he's going to bring it on a defensive end. A guy like, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen are always going to be out there regardless. But a guy like, I'm trying to think of the inverse. Sam Merrill is a great example, right? Like, because he is such a blinking target on defense. Like, I think JB can undervalue, and I know the subtexters are waving their Sam Merrill towels right now. I don't want to get people too riled up, but I think his shooting is arguably the most important skill in basketball right now. And even if that comes at an expense of your defense sometimes, like, what did we say at the beginning? Right now you only have 1, but on a lot of nights you have 2 cheat codes out there. So maybe we should be a little bit more willing to sacrifice a little perimeter defense if you got 2 guys back there. That's what I would say.
Jimmy, I do think adaptability is an interesting one, and I do think it's a good one, because if you remember a number of years ago, we can't just sit here and assume that every single coach that would have been in the same situation as JB Bickerstaff would have gone to the 3 big lineup, right? We can't assume that. There might have been some coaches that said, no, Lauri Markkanen can't play the 3. He's going to come off the bench in a 6-man role. I don't care. It's just not going to work. But he was willing to try that. And I don't want to say it revolutionized the game, but I think it paved the way for other teams around the NBA to try that as well. Utah used Lauri Markkanen as kind of like a small forward every now and then, in part because they saw the success that he was able to have with the Cavs doing that. But before then, Chicago tried it and thought it was a failure and said, we're not going to do it again. So I don't think we can sit here and assume that every single coach in that same situation would have done that, right? I don't think we can sit here and assume that every single coach in the same situation would have benched Kevin Love. He benched Kevin Love. That is a franchise legend. That is a Hall of Famer. That is a difficult, delicate decision for any coach to make. But JB Bickerstaff thought it was best for the team to give more of an opportunity to Dean Wade, and thought that Kevin, the way that Kevin was playing, he wasn't making shots, he wasn't doing anything offensively, and he was a minus on defense. If you look back to the playoffs against the Knicks, he went away from Ricky Rubio in an instant, right? Like, that was a guy who was a big part of their second half of the season rotation. That was a guy who everybody was so excited about coming back, rejoining the lineup after the knee injury. JB Bickerstaff put him out there at the start of the playoffs, saw that it wasn't happening, saw that he was a step or two slow, saw that he didn't fit in that series against New York, couldn't keep up athletically, couldn't keep up from a speed standpoint, and JB went away from him. Already in these playoffs, he benched Karis LeVert for an entire second half. He's gone away from Darius Garland quickly in third quarters. So I do think he does deserve a little bit of credit when it comes to his adaptability and his willingness at times when the situation calls for it, because not every situation is going to call for it. But at times, making the difficult decisions and taking the emotions out of that.
So to the point about the I'll be quick. The point about the multi-big lineups, 2 words for you: Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, right.
Look at what they're doing right now. You can
look at the
Magic. Look at the Magic. Look at even the Denver to some extent with Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic. That you have to draw a very convoluted line, but you can draw a line from some of these teams back to those weird 3 big Cavs. Also, just JB's origin story as Cavs head coach, like that was not an easy situation to take over.
No,
coming off of John B. Lionel. Let's just say that.
Oh boy, PTSD.
So I think what Chris finished with was what my main focal point was for JB's positive, was how he's been able to manage emotions this season, especially with all these new pieces, and how he's had to adapt to what people's roles have become in different areas of the season, but also understanding that if he wants these guys to be at their top level, they have to have the confidence in themselves to play in certain scenarios. Yes, I'm talking about Darius Garland, and I've talked about it all season long. The opportunities that he got throughout the season, even in fourth quarter situations when he had been struggling, even when the fan base had been calling for him to get benched, everything of the sorts. J.B. Bickerstaff knew, Donovan Mitchell knew that the opportunities that Darius Garland was going to get, even if he failed in those scenarios, was going to help him grow into a better fourth quarter player when it mattered most. That comes into play in the playoffs. We saw that when he had a good fourth quarter in the last series. And I'm saying that the emotional management that he's done, even talking with Donovan Mitchell and understanding what he's gone through this season, and everything else, talking about Max Strus and how he wants to see adjustments and things like that. Those things can be kept under wraps until things become really, really tight-knit when it comes to playoffs and under the microscope and things of that nature. So I think how J.B. Bickerstaff has managed the emotions of the players that he needs the most on his roster has been a positive for this team throughout the entire season up until this point, because now we're starting to see some of it unravel just a little bit. But the negatives, I mean, like we said, it's just X's and O's and being able to make adjustments mid-game, and rather than making them after the game, and being able to make them on the fly, and X's and O's and all of those things, knowing things that J.B. Bickerstaff can work on and has been working on for the last couple of years, but still needs to get better at. But to that point, I wanted to get to this question because we asked J.B. Bickerstaff this today. Actually, Chris asked this question. Lloyd from Ohio asks, 3-point shooting has been horrible. A lot of the shots have been open or wide open. What can the Cavs do to improve? Chris, do you want to tell the people what J.B. Bickerstaff told you today?
Just keep shooting them. I mean, you have to focus on the process. You have to focus on the quality of look. If you run good offense and you get an open or a wide open 3 and it's going to a guy who is capable of making that shot can't be passed up. You can't stop trying to orchestrate offense that kind of way. I mean, I think there are certain times throughout the course of a game, throughout the course of a series, where players are going to recognize that the paint might be open and it's time to just go downhill. It's time to put your shoulder into somebody and see if you can finish at the rim. It seemed like in Game 6, Donovan saw something. Donovan saw something that allowed him to get into the rim, and so many of his points came inside the paint around the rim just because of the way that the Magic chose to defend. And he capitalized on that. But this is an offense primarily built on drive and kick. This is an offense that is primarily built on Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland orchestrating shots either for themselves or for others. And when you're playing against a team like Boston, you're going to have to shoot threes and you're going to have to make threes. That's the formula for success. Think back to the first round. The only game that the Heat, and by the way, brilliant coach Eric Spoelstra, right? Great team, Miami Heat. Great culture, Miami Heat. The only game that the Heat were able to win in that series, despite Spoelstra being arguably the best coach in the entire NBA, it was the game where they made 23 threes. So you're going to have to make threes to compete with the Celtics. You're not winning games in the 90s. You're not winning games in the low hundreds. You're going to have to score and score in bunches. This can't be a defensive-minded series for the Cavs. I totally get that they are a defense-first team, and I totally get that they want to be a team that makes things really, really difficult on the opponent. But they just don't have the pieces to do that against this particular team. They had the pieces and they had the construction from a lineup standpoint to do that against the Magic. They were built to take away the Magic's biggest strength. Their defense is built with the weakness being the three-point shot and defending the three. That's problematic against the Celtics. So you're going to have to score points. You're going to have to take threes. And I thought JB was right. If we're going to continue to generate quality looks, how can we possibly be mad at that? We can't only focus on the results here.
Kind of a bad time for the Cavs to needing to make them threes, though. You know, like it's the Rock Fight series, and again, in that series there were shots available that could have been made too. But I just think that as a team and for a ton of individual guys, we talked a lot about confidence, shooting confidence or lack thereof during the Orlando series. I wonder where a lot of these guys are at, man. Like, It's just like, I mean, we know, like Isaac Okoro, we know that's you don't really know where his confidence is going to be at until you get to the arena that day and see the first one go in, right? And even then, he made 3 in the first half against Boston in game 1, didn't score at all in the second half. I think he was 0 for 2 from 3. Max Strus looked like he was putting it together at the end of that Orlando series. 3 straight double-digit scoring games, hit some threes in all of those games. Game 1, 2 for 8, 1 for 5. And that's kind of the story of Max Strus's career as a shooter. He's always been 36-ish, 35-ish, 37-ish% from three-point range, but on high volume attempts, which still makes him a valuable player and a shooter that you have to respect over large samples. We ain't playing in large samples right now. We might be in a dip. I don't know. Guys, I mean, Karis LeVert, 0 for 2. Sam Merrill, he's in a particularly hard, difficult spot because of the short leash that's on him. We can go on and on. There are complicating matters for the Cavs' confidence right now. I don't think Darius Garland is playing with a ton of confidence right now. And that's especially difficult, not just because the Celtics are going to ask you to take threes, but because of the kind of threes they're going to ask you to take, right? Like Boston, yes, they will leave Isaac Okoro open in the corner for a catch and shoot 3 to rotate, but like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, we're talking pull-up threes. It's off the dribble. It's with a guy coming behind you because Boston's pick and roll defense, they're playing a drop, which means the center is going to be playing below the 3-point line. Just he's there to contain the dribble, right? He's there to, the Cavs keep talking about getting in the paint. Well, it's kind of hard when you have one guy behind you and one guy in front of you to create those kinds of opportunities. That's what Boston's defense is designed to take away. So they're encouraging the more difficult of the two kind of 3-point shots too, right? Like it's a pull up instead of a catch and shoot if they have their way.
Right. Yes and no. But if you look back at the numbers from game 1, the Cavs got 42 threes, guys. 42 of them. 38 of those were classified by NBA.com tracking data as open or wide open. That's good offense. Those are good shots, especially against a Boston team. All 8 of Darius's three-point attempts were open or wide open. Max Strus got open looks consistently. Like, yes, that number is going to be skewed a little bit because they certainly do not guard Isaac Okoro, and they're not going to guard Isaac. So every single one of his threes is going to be open or wide open. But there was space out there. There was space out there for Donovan Mitchell. There was space out there for Darius Garland. There were clean looks for all of those guys. You cannot shoot 26 to 28% on open or wide open threes. Like, that can't happen. Max Strus got to be better. Darius Garland got to be better. Sam Merrill got to be better. All these guys, at some point, like, these guys have to play to the level that they are capable of before we really dig into the minutia of the X's and O's of JB Bickerstaff, the tactics of JB Bickerstaff, the in-game adjustments of JB, and his coaching overall. And they're getting nothing from Georges Niang. Nothing. He was a key member of this team throughout the entire regular season. He was the stabilizing force of the second unit. He was one of the primary signings that they made this offseason. He has been nothing in the playoffs. Karis LeVert has given them one game to this point out of 8, I think, where he actually played to the level that you feel like he's an asset to the team. Darius Garland has been hit and miss. You know, this is supposed to be the second most important player on this roster, or the second most important player to their offensive success on this roster, I should say. And he hasn't been good enough. And Max Strus, like, are you kidding me? This is a $63 million man who's going 2 of 8 from the field and 1 of 5 from 3-point range. So at some point, it's just on these dudes to make some shots. And you would think eventually variance swings in their favor. But every time you sit there and you say, hey, shooting variance, it's been 8 games of not being able to make open shots. Like, what is going on here?
I mean, that's where people will make this criticism often. I think there are moments where analytics miss the human element, right? If in a vacuum, player X misses 10 3-pointers in a row, and then the numbers, and they're a decent 3-point shooter, then the numbers say the next, more of the next 10 will go in than usually would, right?
Yeah.
But if put a name to, like, a real person misses 10 threes in a row, that 11th one, they're going to be like, oh crap, I missed 10 threes in a row.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a little, shooting variance is a real thing. Confidence is a real thing. And it's just really hard to quantify.
Yeah. And I mean, Georges Niang talked about it in practice before they went to Orlando in the last series, talking about if the law of averages says that if I missed a lot, that I'm going to start making a lot. Well, buddy, that was before game 3 of the last series, and you still haven't done much since. So I think everybody's waiting for Georges Niang to snap out of whatever, I don't even know what to call it, whatever drought he's going through right now. But yeah, that's the first thing that's got to change if he's going to continue to get minutes, because we all know that the Boston Celtics would kill him on the defensive end. They just as bad as they targeted Sam Merrill, they're going to target Georges Niang, especially because you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, who can go into him with their size and strength. But let's get back to the subtextures, because before I go into a tangent. This next one comes from William. He says, "Greetings, sirs. The Cavaliers are starting an unheard of lineup with one player taller than 6'4.5". When will Allen and Wade return to the lineup?" And I think, Chris, you alluded to it earlier in the podcast. Jared Allen feels less ready to come back, or less likely to come back, than Dean Wade does. And Dean Wade's listed as out, and Jared Allen's listed as questionable. So obviously we heard at practice today that JB Bickerstaff said that there's a chance for Dean Wade to come back this series and even in game 3, but it's not looking like he's going to give us any hints or quivers that he's going to come back at all. And Jared Allen, like you said, with the shoe situation, it looks like that could be worse than a bruise at this point. So, what do you think of
JB's
the
not going to give
situation?
anything away when it comes to his lineups, when it comes to his strategy, when it comes to a guy's availability. He believes that there is an advantage to not releasing the starting lineup until 30 minutes on the clock. He believes that there is an advantage when it comes to disclosing information. Every coach is going to handle these kinds of things a different way. Ty Lue used to be notorious for saying, I can't remember, when he was asked who his starting lineup was going to be or whether a guy was going to be able to play who was on the injury report. He would say, I can't remember. JB says, we'll see. That's his go-to line when it comes to any injury. But him saying today that there was a chance that Dean Wade was going to play in game 2, there just weren't any signs pointing to that. So that was complete gamesmanship. That was not revealing an answer until he absolutely had to reveal an answer. He didn't have to reveal an answer until 5:30 p.m. earlier today when the injury report needed to be released to the NBA. So that's just how he's going to continue to handle this. But my reporting has pointed to, if Dean is going to come back, barring any kind of setback, the Cavs, people close to Dean, everybody has really been circling the game 3, game 4 in Cleveland. That's right around the 2-month mark from when he injured his knee. It's a knee sprain. Those things obviously take time to heal, and they take different amounts of time based on the grade that it is. This organization is notorious for not disclosing too much information when it comes to injuries. It would be nice if they were a little bit more transparent. Some other teams around the NBA are more transparent, but the Cavs choose not to because it feels like they have this culture of protecting players as much as they possibly can and trying to create a culture that is incredibly player friendly. But everything has pointed to Dean. If he comes back, it's this weekend. And when it comes to Jarrett, we've talked about this over and over and over again. There is a difference between being healthy enough to play and being effective in a playoff environment. And the kind of injury that he has in a playoff environment, with the responsibilities that he has at both ends of the floor, it's just not an easy one to play through. It's not an ankle sprain that you can tape up and you can take some aspirin and things along those lines. He gets hit on every single possession, multiple times on every single possession. It is important for him to be able to protect himself in a certain kind of way, move in a certain kind of way, put his arms above his head to go get rebounds, to block shots, to contest shots. So JB is going to keep saying, we'll see. The Cavs are going to keep listing him as questionable because it's gamesmanship at the time of the playoffs. And the Cavs as an organization and JB as a coach believe that there is a benefit in terms of withholding or not fully revealing the extent of an injury, the timeline for an injury, and all that kind of stuff.
I just remember going to Jamal Mosley's press conference for the Orlando Magic ahead of one of the games, and somebody asked him if Isaac or Jonathan Isaac was going to be in the starting lineup, and he gave a straight up answer. And I think my jaw might have hit the floor just because I was not used to somebody giving a straight up answer to an injury question, right. And my brain automatically shifted to, wait, I have to report this. I have to get this out.
Now notice and remember that Jamal Mosley did not do that in game 1, however. That was a mystery. Would Jonathan Isaac be in the starting lineup? Would somebody else be in the starting lineup? So he kept that one a mystery until about 30 minutes before tip-off. But once he showed his card in game 1 and put Isaac in the starting lineup, in game 2, when he was asked, are you going to stick with Jonathan Isaac in the starting lineup, he was willing to reveal that.
All right. I think we're ready to move on to the last question of this podcast from the subtexters. And it's a pretty in-depth one, and I like it. It comes from Frank in Cincy. He says, could the Cavs put Al Horford into every pick and roll for the first 6 minutes of the game? Try to exhaust him. Isaac Okoro is good going at the rim. Maybe he could handle the short roll if they don't just straight switch. If they do switch, Mitchell and Garland can't beat Horford. We're cooked anyway. Also, Garland needs to shoot 20 plus threes. Oh, he says, also, Garland needs to shoot 20 plus threes, right? Or 20 plus times, right? It seems like those shots are there, and if they miss, they miss. He's got to find his inner Dame. Once those shots fall, it'll open the pass. So I think the first one is the most interesting because I think we can all agree that Darius needs to shoot the ball more to not only help and take weight off Donovan Mitchell, but to also get his confidence up. But I think the initial putting Al Horford into screens and seeing what the Boston Celtics defense does is an interesting concept. But also, wasn't game one supposed to be the feel out game? Like, that would have been when they did that. And especially with how
they did.
Okay, go ahead.
They did that repeatedly. I mean, I've never seen in my life Isaac Okoro set as many screens as he did in game one against the Celtics. The Cavs recognized that Al Horford was guarding Isaac, and they used Isaac as the screen setter. Whether it was Donovan who had the ball in his hands, whether it was Darius who had the ball in his hands, they used Isaac as the screen setter because they tried to get an advantageous matchup with Donovan or Darius against Al Horford. They put him in so many actions early in that game by using Isaac as the screener. And if Horford is going to continue to guard Isaac, and I would think that he would because it was relatively successful. The Cavs only scored 95 points and they had another terrible offensive rating. The Cavs are going to continue to use Isaac as a screener, and Darius is going to have to try and attack Al Horford in drop coverage, or he's going to have to attack him off the dribble in an isolation situation. It is going there. There are opportunities, and we talked about this coming into this series. There are going to be opportunities and advantageous one-on-one matchups for either Darius, Donovan, Karis LeVert. And they're going to have to make the defense pay for this specific strategy. The switching, Al Horford in a drop, Al Horford guarding Isaac Okoro. That is up to the other guys to make them pay for that. But they absolutely tried to put Al Horford in repeated actions. Sometimes it was successful, other times it wasn't. But go back and watch the film and count how many times Isaac Okoro was either screening for Donovan or screening for Darius, because they knew the weak point of the defense, if there is one, it's Al Horford and the way that they're asking Horford to guard in this series, at least in game one of this series.
So I just wanted to reiterate the question for the first part when he said, if they don't just straight switch, if they do switch, if Mitchell and Garland can't beat Horford, we're cooked anyway. So that the if is the important part for the question. But I wanted to, Jimmy, get to you and talk more about the importance of Darius Garland and taking advantage of these matchups, but also just getting more shots up.
It can't be a Jekyll or Hyde thing with your second best offensive player. It just can't. It can't be a different guy showing up. And it's not just if the shots don't fall, the shots don't fall, right? To our subtexter's point. But Darius actually had it going a little bit in the second half. I think he started 1 for 7 in that game and finished 6 for 14 or something. I think he was 3 for 5 in the second half. If you're 3 for 5 and you're Darius Garland in a half, that ain't enough shots. Part of that is they were getting run off the court. he sat down a little sooner than he might otherwise do, right? But I just feel like there's still a whatever is in him that says, well, sometimes I'm worried about. I don't know what he's worried about. Whatever switch he needs to flip, he needs to flip it, man. Like we can't be worrying too much about what everyone else does or doesn't have. Again, this is how it was explained after game 5, I believe, when Darius had a big first quarter against Orlando. Marcus Morris said that Darius worries too much about getting other people's shots instead of his own shot. When again, it can be the other way around. Like if guys, you have to sometimes prove yourself to a defense. You have to make yourself a threat, or make yourself a bigger threat than you've been shown so far to make them draw that help. That's how you get better shots for your teammates. You have to make them respect your, I don't know, scoring motor, whatever that is. Because right now, I don't know. That was a rough basketball term I tried to make up on the fly there. But whatever Darius isn't tapping into, he needs to tap into it. I'm very interested to read Chris's story in the morning for that reason, because it's like, this is supposed to be Dame and CJ. Both of you guys are supposed to be certified bucket getters at all times. And sometimes it's a slow start. Sometimes he scores 17 points in the first quarter and then he's quiet for the other 3. Like, it's just a hard thing to put your finger on. And again, I will say for the 1000th time that Darius has, capital B, capital T, been through it this year with all the injuries and the personal stuff that he's been dealing with. Like, that stuff needs to be that stuff should be mentioned every time we talk about this. But it also, like, it's like we were talking about with Donovan. Like, the further you get, the higher you aspire to climb in this league, and the further you get into the playoffs, the less we care about the less we care. The less that context counts, right? The less the fans will accept that as a reason. Like, reasons become excuses in the playoffs. Steph Curry had a sprained MCL in the 2016 NBA Finals. We didn't care.
Yeah, so the other thing is, I talked to a number of different people around the NBA, smarter people than me, and I just asked them, I said, what do you see from Darius? What is your basketball eye telling you that I might be missing as a reason for why he may be struggling? And I basically got the shoulder shrug emoji. There are so many people around the NBA that just can't figure it out. They all say this kid is too talented to play like this for this long period of time. Because if you remember down the stretch of the regular season, guys, he was not good for the Cavs. He was consistently scoring under 20 points. He was having off shooting nights, shooting 25% from 3-point range, under 50 from the field overall. And so many people that have watched the Cavs over the years, and they're smarter at these things than any of us are, they're wondering what's going on with him too. And the only thing anybody will say is that he just needs to play better. He's not playing well enough. And sometimes guys just don't play well. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. Basketball is hard. Scoring is hard. The playoffs are difficult. There are defensive matchups that aren't necessarily favorable for him as an offensive player. He was being guarded by Jalen Suggs early in the series against Orlando. He's being guarded by Drew Holiday and Derek White here against the Celtics. So it's a situation that's hard to explain because you expect more out of him because you can see the talent and you can see the flashes, but he just hasn't been good enough for the Cavs.
Is it possible? I'm not saying this is what I believe, but it's a question that I've been considering since the playoffs began. Is it possible that Darius Garland is just one of these guys who's more of an 82-game guy than a 16-game guy?
Sure, there are guys like that all across the NBA. I think it's probably too early to say that when we're talking about his second playoff appearance in his
Agreed.
career. But 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 are we going to have that conversation as we continue to go on here? Are we going to continue to monitor that and wonder that? Absolutely. He's not the most physical guy, right? He doesn't finish through contact around the rim. He's got the in-between float game, but he doesn't draw fouls. He doesn't really finish with strength. He's more of a finesse player, more of a herky-jerky player, more of a crafty player. So, stylistically, he's going to continue to get picked on the defensive end of the floor. Stylistically, you can see some flaws in terms of physical limitations that would make you wonder about him on the playoff stage, for sure.
Jimmy, I bet you look like you were about to jump in there. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I was to the finishing point. It's not just through. Sometimes he's just out here smoking layups, and I don't understand what's going on. Like, he gets to the rim, and it's like I've seen, like, this has happened with Russell Westbrook as Russell Westbrook has gotten older. But I'm not saying that to compare the two, because it's really hard to compare those two. But that's the only, he misses them badly, that's the comparison I'm drawing to Westbrook. He misses them badly, and I don't understand why.
No, yeah,
I think
you're
there's
absolutely
another layer
right.
to this too. And I'm not saying that this is definitely the situation and this is my final declaration. But there is something that I think people too often ignore. And I don't want this to come across as this is my take, but it's just generally speaking. I have to be very, very careful about this. This idea that every young player gets better is a fallacy. Just because a guy is still young doesn't mean he gets better. Some players plateau. Some players hit their peak. Some players are maxed out, right? It's just something to consider.
I would also say, to that point, development isn't linear, right? Like,
it's not.
Just because someone gets better from year 1 to year 2 doesn't mean that they will get better from year 2 to year 3.
Right.
Just if they take a huge jump, as Darius did early in his career, sometimes the expectations get a little wonky because he's shown you so much early, and you're like, wow, like, how much more can he do?
Right.
And sometimes the leap, oftentimes I would say, the leap from, baby deer rookie to I have my stuff figured out is actually easier than I have my stuff figured out to bona fide whatever you think Darius Garland can be. Like, I think offensive, from the early signs that he showed us, offensive star was within his realm of outcomes, and by the way, still can be. We just haven't seen it as consistently as we want to right now, and I think that because he was so good so early, people are sort of tapping their foot and thinking, like, what's going on here?
I also think it's easier to grant somebody the benefit of the doubt when there are logical circumstances that could be an explanation. And I think the fractured jaw and eating out of a straw for 4 weeks and losing all of that time during the season and then having to come back midway through the season, try and get back into your rhythm, try and get back into game shape, try and trust it more when you're driving to the basket and not have PTSD. Like, again, not an excuse. We're far removed from that. But that happened, and that can't be ignored. And that would be, to me anyway, that would be a logical explanation for some of the things that we've seen with Darius. So for me, I'm reserving final judgment I'm not going to make sweeping declarations based on this season. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to see what it looks like for Darius next season, when he's further removed from all that kind of stuff, and he didn't have to deal with all that kind of stuff. In saying that, maybe an NBA front office is not going to take the same approach that I'm going to take. Maybe this front office is not going to give him the same benefit of the doubt and feel like it might be time to try and go a different direction. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but everything is always evaluated in an off season. Always.
For another team, though, kind of perfect time to buy lowish on Darius Garland, particularly if I still think Darius can get you a lot.
Yeah.
Get you a lot on the trade market, but if you believe in this talent and you believe, as we're saying here, a lot going on, a lot that can explain what he's dealing with, and it's not just, yes, it's been a while since the broken jaw, but like he still gets hit in the face all the time.
Yeah.
It happened again in game 1, so like I would imagine I've never had a facial injury like that, knock on wood, but like I would imagine every time he does get hit in the face, probably brings a little something back of that, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it happens against the Boston Celtics. And that's
in
something.
That building.
Yep. And I think the other thing that I wanted to point out with that was that I was, as I do on occasions, just scrolling through the Bird app, or the formerly known Bird app, and I remember seeing when this conversation was starting, I just remembered seeing a Darius Garland highlight with a quote tweet that said, "He's in there somewhere." And it was from a highlight from 2022. And I just typed in, "He's in there somewhere." No Darius Garland reference, no nothing. 4 to 5 different highlights pulled up with people commenting this year about Darius Garland being in there somewhere, about plays like against Drew Holiday when he was on the Milwaukee Bucks, or just plays against the Memphis Grizzlies earlier this year, or plays from 2022 when he was young, naive, and doing whatever he wanted with the basketball because there was nothing wrong he could do. Like, so I want to say he's in there somewhere. We've seen Darius Garland shine. He's had 51 points and 27 of them in the fourth quarter at one point. Like, that is something that that's why he got the max deal. That's why he got $200 million. Like, and to the point that you guys are making on buying low, is it really buying low if the Cavs know that they're going to have to eat his contract or do something with it and going to either need a whole bunch of assets to get it back or anything else? Or is that a conversation we got to save for a different day? Because that's a whole different can of worms that I feel like you guys opened an hour into this podcast.
I mean, I brought it up recently on a podcast. A fake trade. We do fake trades all the time. People go to the trade machine. Bill Simmons does it. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley for Kevin Durant. Who says no? So all I'm saying is, like, there is a pathway out of Darius's contract, right? There is a framework that the Cavs could put together that could rejigger the roster and not be a significant step back in talent. And you're right, Ethan, that means in some cases you have to attach another asset to him. But if you don't want to make the Evan Mobley decision in terms of how much to pay him, if you're not ready to give him a max contract extension, and you're not ready to fully commit to the Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley thing, then that and Darius is a pathway to rejigger the roster and maybe bring in a different running mate for Donovan Mitchell that you think would be a better fit. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying that that's definitely the way that the Cavs are going to look at it this offseason. I'm not saying that they're definitely going to explore those options. But those are things that members of front offices across the NBA are going to think about on a daily basis. How can we improve? How can we take the next step? Maybe it's organically. Maybe it's a new coach. Maybe it's changing up the roster dynamics. Maybe it's breaking up Darius and Donovan Mitchell. So many things. The Cavs owe it to themselves. The front office owes it to themselves to explore many different avenues within reason to improve this team. If they see in this particular series, it's only game one in the series against Boston, but if they see in this particular series, hey, we're not on the same level with Boston. What's our path to trying to get on the same level with Boston? Because as of right now, guys, it looks like the Cavs are the fourth best team in the Eastern Conference. And they're playing like the fourth-ish best team in the Eastern Conference. Like, are they going to be satisfied with that? Are they going to be cool with that? Or are they going to look at possibilities of taking another step next year?
Definitely. The trade stuff is a conversation for another day. I still think,
for sure,
however, that Darius Garland is only the second most likely guard to be traded on this roster this summer.
I'm going to give my quick counter to that for the trade conversation. Obviously, we can go more in depth another time. But if you're Donovan Mitchell, and sure, Kevin Durant, we're talking about the Darius Garland, Evan Mobley scenario at the moment. The trade machine scenario that is not real, purely skeptical. If you're Donovan Mitchell, and Kevin Durant is a All-NBA third-team candidate this season. Sure. Do you know how long he has left in his career? And knowing that you, as Donovan Mitchell, want to be successful for years to come, not just 2-3 years, which might be all that KD has left, if that, to be successful. Because we know Donovan wants to get rid of the skeptics about him being a 82-game season, like we talked briefly about Darius Garland potentially being. But is that something that you want to explore and only be with KD, who is still a great scorer, even at his age, to just not have him in a couple years and then have to go find someone else, or eventually request a trade afterwards because you don't feel like it worked out and you find out that the Cavs can't bring other people here? I don't know. That's definitely a conversation for a different day. I feel like that's more in depth. But if nobody else has anything else to add, I think we can wrap up the podcast there. Chris, Jimmy? All right.
I got nothing. I'm ready for bed.
All right. That'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to subscribe to Subtext. Tomorrow's game 2, and we got to find out if Jarrett Allen's going to play. Sure, we gave you a little insight to what we think could potentially happen, but I'm going to keep saying it till he's wrong, or till he's not the first one to say it. Chris Fedor might have the news yet again for you guys on Subtext. So, subscribe by signing up for a 14-day free trial, or going to cleveland.com/Cavs and clicking on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get your voice heard through Subtext and for this Cavs community. That's all for now. Y'all be safe. We out.